It is time. We're streaming on both Twitch TV and here on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. Let me set up the camera here so you guys can get a pretty good angle of the room. That doesn't look too bad. Okay, so it is October 1st. Happy spooky season. Happy October 1st to all my spooky baddies and my Latina Gothic mommies. Okay, so tonight the stream is going to be episode 5 of the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix. Let me switch over here to our live feed on Twitch so they can see what's happening as well. Hello everybody, how's it going? We are live. We are in action. Okay, like I said, tonight the stream is episode 5 of the Mr. McMahon documentary series on Netflix. It's all about Vince McMahon. And after this, there's only one more episode left. 5 and 6. That's going to do it for this season. At least this series right now on Netflix. So this episode is titled Family Business. And I've always told you guys, I've said it many times before, one of the main differences between WWE from any other wrestling promotion, WWE has always remained a family business. Okay? Vince McMahon learned how to do it from his father. Vince McMahon Jr. passed it down to his daughter Stephanie and his son-in-law Triple H. So tonight, the title of the episode is Family Business. We're going to be going through episode 5, and then I believe the final episode, episode 6, we will do Friday night, and we'll also do, I believe, a Halloween special with The Last Drive-In and Joe Bob, but I still have to decide. The next couple days, I have to pretty much do like a bunch of Halloween decorating around the house and outside and stuff like that, so might not have that much time for like Wednesday and Thursday, but we will see what happens. Okay, so I think we are just about ready to get started here. Like I said, episode 5. Let's see what this episode talks about.
The Shakespearean tragedy of this tale is that the great success that has been enjoyed by Vincent Kennedy McMahon was driven by the overcompensatory behavior, rebelling against the first miserable 12 years of his life. And escaping that abuse has been his life pursuit in creating an atmosphere in which he is untouchable and invulnerable to outside forces and in control of his own destiny.
What we know about Vince McMahon's childhood, we only know from Vince McMahon. Years ago, he did a Playboy interview that talked about his upbringing, that talked about the physical abuse that he suffered at the hands of his stepfather, and alluded to sexual abuse that he implied was at the hands of his mother.
I'm not big at looking backwards at all. I don't know whether or not I'm afraid to look back, like what's back there. My childhood was what it was. It was difficult. I mean, there's fighting, there's infighting, there's incest. And you don't like it, but I felt it as a kid when you're getting the crap beat out of you. Once he stops, if you're still breathing, you're still living, you win. I know from a psychological standpoint, when you're abused as a kid, the tendency is for you to abuse. I think sometimes that's just a cop-out. I've never subscribed to that. You know, anything that's rotten like that, or anything bad that happens to you, get rid of it. Will they come forward on occasion? Sure. Will it hurt on occasion? Sure. But throw it the fuck back there and go forward.
Episode 5, Family Business.
Coming up next, you will see for the first time ever Shane McMahon and Stephanie McMahon, the only two children of Vince and Linda McMahon, talking about what it's like to have their lives unfold before the cameras. I'm fascinated to know, what was it like growing up as a McMahon?
You want to start? Go for it.
Being Vince McMahon's son, I grew up in a very interesting world. I always wanted to be in the business, and the business of the business specifically. I started at a very early age. I remember being in the audience, I remember being backstage, was all over the place, just soaking it all in. You know, I would sweep the ring, I would take the guys' jackets back. And then I became referee and ring announcer, and you start earning your stripes.
Shane and Mr. McMahon.
My involvement as a performer started as a surrogate to my dad.
Did you see Shane there holding the ropes for his daddy?
You know, if my dad pissed somebody off, you couldn't get to the boss right away. You have to go through different layers. And it caught on, and everybody was having fun, and we just ran with it.
After this chorus of blues, for the boys under the air of Parenthood Road.
I love it, getting the ability to go do something I've always wanted to do since I was very little. So that's how the family dynamic started to grow, and eventually became Vince's daughter.
Let me jump in for just 1 second, please. I have always wanted to be a part of this company, and I'm so proud to be today.
Now I'm going to pause it right here. I'm going to pause it right there because, like I've said before many times, Vince McMahon always said if one of his children were going to take over after him, it would have most likely been Stephanie McMahon, who is the youngest between her and Shane. Shane was obviously born first. He got into the company first. And then later on, Stephanie McMahon was introduced pretty much around the Attitude Era. They were both pretty much introduced to a wider audience in the Attitude Era around the late 90s. But Shane McMahon had even been doing previous things before becoming a character to his father's aid in the Attitude Era. Like he said, he would pretty much dabble with doing cleaning after matches, just helping take down the ring, stuff like that, and then also referee and commentary. But obviously, as WWE kind of progresses into the future after the late 90s, Shane McMahon was always kind of in and out of the business. He was always more of the business side than actual, in-ring, being an on-screen personality. So Shane was always kind of in and out, but Stephanie is like the one true cornerstone that Vince McMahon has kind of applied throughout the years. And obviously Stephanie McMahon married to Paul Levesque, Triple H. So now, once Vince McMahon stepped down, those were pretty much the next candidates in line. It was going to go to Stephanie McMahon, his daughter, and his son-in-law, Triple H, Paul Levesque.
It was larger than life, and I could feel that as a kid. It was just the most exciting thing to be a part of. WWE has always been polarizing, and when I was growing up, some people would love me just because of who my father was, and some people would not give me the time of day because of who my father was.
Vince McMahon, flanked there by his young daughter, Stephanie McMahon.
When did it first get broached about you being a character?
It was after I graduated college.
Just relax, no pressure, everything we good.
You take it easy on me?
Oh, without a doubt.
A decision was made in a very short period of time to give it a try and see how it went.
When Steph started to work with us, it escalated incredibly fast. There was a storyline where Steph was getting married to a talent named Test. But the writers, they didn't know what the payoff was. There was never an ending to the story. So I come up with an idea and present it to Vince. You should take a look at this. If I was at her bachelorette party and I Mickey'd her drink, and then I end up getting married to her like at one of those drive-through things in Vegas.
Just story. What if I was at her bachelorette party and I Mickey'd her drink? Like, Triple H just says it so casually, but again, like, this is the Attitude Era, and this is the late 90s of the WWF, guys. Like, stories like that were pretty common and pretty popular amongst audiences. Triple H is obviously talking about the story where there was a storyline where Stephanie McMahon was in a relationship and going to get married to another wrestler at that time under the name of Test. Rest in peace to Test. He was a great wrestler, great performer, but the writers had no ending to the story. They didn't know where things would go after Stephanie McMahon married Test. So Triple H pretty much gets a hold of the story, and he pretty much puts his 2 cents in there like, hey, he's the one that actually gets married to Stephanie McMahon, which creates a little feud between him and Test in the ring and on camera. But the relationship that started in the story obviously became reality, because once Triple H and Stephanie McMahon started working together more, Triple H, I guess, decided to make a move in real life, and the rest is history.
He's like, man, I love that.
And his line is, and Vince, it's not a question of if, but how many times.
Consummate the marriage!
God, I cannot believe that.
The first time we go back on TV after this whole angle happened, the crowd turns on her and they're chanting slut. And Vince, as they're going crazy for her, he looks at me and he goes, meaning like this is money. Yeah, I've got a big smile on my face because that means the audience is participating. Anytime the audience is participating, they're loving what it is you're doing. So Steph became this great heel, you know, and she was willing to do anything. You know, she's always been, you know, whatever it is you want, Dad, you know, she knew what I was trying to do. If anybody knows anything about screwing, it's you.
When I was younger in my career, I was just all on board to do whatever he wanted. I totally look back on some of the stuff I did and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Yeah, for sure.
Did you think it was weird that your dad was having you do that?
Yes, sometimes I thought it was a little bit weird, but it was a different time in our business.
It was a completely different time in the 90s, in the late 90s, ladies and gentlemen. Like we've talked about, the Attitude Era was finally becoming popular in the WWF. Ended at WrestleMania 17 in about 2001, I believe. And that is because Vince McMahon decided to join and become partners with Stone Cold Steve Austin, which the fans absolutely hated. That was the end of the Attitude Era. But these were completely different times back then. I think if there was like a true breakdown between, you know, Stephanie and Shane McMahon, I would say that Shane McMahon is definitely more business and Stephanie is definitely more rebel. She, especially at a very young age, I mean, like she said, she was willing to do some of the more kind of risque storylines and just be, you know, just putting herself out there to be kind of on the end of the spectrum from taking like promos from The Rock or Jericho. There was a little bit of a feud too, I remember, where there was like this love triangle, I think, between Triple H and Kurt Angle and Stephanie McMahon. And then Chris Jericho got involved in it. It was all over the place in the late 90s, but that's just a lot of the writing and the stories that they were coming up with back then. But in Stephanie's younger years, I mean, now, you know, she's kind of become like Vince in a way where you rarely ever see her make appearances. But she's definitely she's definitely under control of the business now ever since Vince McMahon stepped down and pretty much gave her and Paul Levesque, Triple H, all the power. But it's interesting how, like, back in the late 90s, we would kind of always see Shane and we would see Stephanie a little bit more involved. As the years move forward, Shane McMahon, like I said, is pretty much in and out of the business all the time. He really wasn't going to be the next Vince McMahon. If anybody ever believed that, it's definitely not happening, just because he was always doing other things with the business and stuff. But Stephanie has always, like I said, been the cornerstone. And to me, it makes a lot of sense to give it to Stephanie and Triple H. Triple H, obviously, he was a wrestler and he came up during some of their most popular times. And he pretty much knows how to handle the business and treat the wrestlers the way that they need to be treated. And I think Triple H, at the end of the day, he tries to give back to the fans as much as possible, just because he appreciates what the wrestlers do and the sacrifices that they all have to make. So it only makes absolute sense to me that it would be Stephanie and Triple H now in control of the company.
Of all the crazy stuff that's happened in my life, from starting out as a fan to where I am, the family part of it would probably be the craziest. So after this storyline where Steph gets married to me secretly against her will, it became this whole thing, the McMahon-Helmsley era, and now we're running WWE.
The McMahon-Helmsley era.
That's where I'm with her every day. And that's how we get to know each other, really.
I was not allowed to date our talent, but it was my dad who, ironically, sort of pushed us together.
Paul is a wonderful human being. He and I were friends. And I would even lead and say, Steph, you need to find somebody, a real man, someone like Triple H.
And then my brother would say, not Triple H. And my dad would go, oh yeah, no, of course, not Triple H. But, guy just like him.
Shane was very much against it, vehemently so.
You guys make me sick. Hey, brothers, come on, give me a hug.
Storylines 101. Don't date the boss's daughter.
Shane, give me Stan. You're gonna let your daughter date a wrestler? Shane, that's who I am. I'm wrestling, I'm performing. I don't know what you mean by that. And so, to me, it made sense for Stephanie to date and marry someone like Paul. As it's moving forward, there are moments in time where it's Vince, and he's Vince McMahoning this, and like even just as we're looking for locations for the wedding at one point in time, he seriously suggests to us holding it on pay-per-view. So what if Stephanie and Paul's wedding was live on pay-per-view? Wow, people would buy that. It'd be awesome. It'd be great. And Steph said, no. And when Steph says absolutely not, he's like selfish and like, I can't believe you're selfish. And then Vince books Vince versus Steph, and I believe a street fight 6 days before our legitimate wedding.
And I believe the match that Mr. McMahon had against his very own daughter, Stephanie, was at No Mercy 2003, I believe it was. And he books a street fight match against his own daughter. And Vince McMahon wins the match, but this is 2003 is pretty much the marriage between Stephanie and Triple H. So now they are finally, a real life couple, and actually like fans are starting to know, this is not just a storyline anymore. This is pretty much happening in real life.
I remember my mom actually threatening my dad that if I had a black eye or a broken ankle for my wedding, that she would divorce him on the spot. Needless to say, I had no black eye. I had no broken ankle. I may have gotten choked out in the match, but that's a little bit different.
Yeah, just craziness. Full-on craziness.
What the hell kind of family did I marry into? Right! You guys have got to be the head of the most dysfunctional family on the planet.
created that McMahon family soap opera, and the kids ended up being very, very popular performers, super popular.
And where was Linda during all this time?
She was definitely a big part of all of this.
Linda McMahon!
Linda was very important in the company.
The World Wrestling Federation is known as Vince McMahon's company. The name that you seldom hear was that of Linda McMahon, and she is the chief executive officer of this company.
There weren't a lot of titles, okay, when I came on. It was Vince was the boss, Linda was the second boss. Linda.
So obviously, you know, back in the Attitude Era, Vince McMahon is the boss. He's the owner, and he's pretty much the president of the company. And then just beneath him is his wife, Linda McMahon, who is the chief executive officer. And even further down the line from that, once Linda McMahon stepped away from the family and stepped away from being involved with wrestling entirely, the chief executive officer later became Triple H, who obviously now would be the pretty much part owner, aside from you know, the partnership that they have with the UFC and everything like that now. But pretty much the bosses now are Stephanie McMahon and Triple H Paul Levesque.
Handled the business. Vince handled the creative and the vision.
So my mom introduced me to Linda, my wife. I think I was 16. Linda grew up in a very middle-class family. Both parents worked in nice houses, not rich, but real middle class. And I was just sort of attracted to that.
He had kind of, you know, the bad boy reputation from high school. And so, you know, I was the exact opposite. And you know what? I liked it.
Linda was like 17 when we got married, so very, very young. And I promised her I'd always love her. And I promised her that there'd never be a dull moment. Definitely lived up to that promise.
All right, we got to have a debate at some point in the future. Who takes a worse stunner from Stone Cold? Is it Vince McMahon or is it Linda McMahon? Because that sell on that stunner was pretty sloppy from Linda. I got to be honest. Like, so we got to have a debate. And Vince McMahon's taken about like 30 of them at this point now. But we gotta find out truly who takes the worst stunner and who sells it the worst. Is it Vince McMahon or is it Linda McMahon?
This is gonna hurt me a lot worse than it hurts you.
My mom never wanted to be on TV, ever. She hated being on television. She said, Vince, please don't put me in this position. I'm not a good actress.
Of the four of us, I'm probably the least comfortable in front of the camera. And I'm not nearly as good at it as Shane and Stephanie and Vince are.
Congratulations, Triple H.
She wasn't a good actress, and she knew it. But Shane's involved, Stevie's involved, I'm involved. I think we can use you as a character.
So, without further ado, allow me to present my wife, Linda, accompanied by the beautiful Trish.
I came into the wrestling business in a little bit of a non-traditional route. I was doing fitness modeling.
Fitness model, you know her from the cover of Muscle magazine. Trish Stratus.
As a fan growing up, I was heavily into when Cyndi Lauper came and she was with Wendy Rector. I mean, that was something I was like, oh my God, seeing a female in the ring at that point at my age was very cool to me. But when I first started in 2000, the female role was overtly sexual, I would say.
Well, Trish.
Trish Stratus is my bae. She is the queen. I'm from Buffalo, New York. She's a little bit up the road from me. She's from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. But Trish, now talking a little bit of her side of the story. I think it's important to hear from Trish too during this documentary, just because she had to face a lot of the negative side of the kind of like the Attitude Era, and just at the place where wrestling was at that time, like late 90s, kind of early 2000s. So it's important to see her side of the story as well, because I think, you know, the girls like her, Trish Stratus, Lita, obviously Tori Wilson, they kind of really had to earn their respect on the roster, and not only in backstage in the locker room, but just amongst wrestling fans in general. Just because wrestling and the female talent at that time kind of just had the stereotype. And even Trish said in the last episode, I believe it was, how they were just kind of perceived as eye candy, and it was all just pretty much sex appeal. Sable, I think, left the company around, God, maybe like 2003, 2004. I also used to love Dawn Marie a lot. Dawn Marie is she's also bae because she got her start in ECW and then made the transition over to like the big leagues. But it's Sable decided to leave, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, because she didn't actually like how the female talent was actually being represented and treated, and then two, she was also in a relationship with Brock Lesnar, so maybe she just decided to focus more on family other than having a professional career in wrestling. But even to this day, I mean, they don't mention Sable, they don't talk about Sable. I think honestly, Sable, out of all the female talent at this time, really had the most grudge held against the WWE.
One of my very first storylines was being paired with Vince McMahon. Knowing I was about to work with the boss and, with Mr. McMahon was a huge, huge opportunity. I was super excited about it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think the storyline was actually pitched like, so what's going to happen is you're going to be Vince's mistress.
Oh, and we also love Stacy Keibler, right? Stacy Keibler was a big one too around this time. So for me, it was, my favorites were definitely Trish Stratus, Tori Wilson, Dawn Marie, Stacy Keibler. There were a couple, but Trish Stratus is always bae. She's always the queen in my book. And Lita was very popular with me too because I love the Hardy Boys so much. It was heartbreaking, later on in the years when you find out kind of Lita and Matt Hardy really didn't work out in their relationship. And the whole relationship that Lita had with Edge was kind of real and also kind of a story. Obviously now, like in modern day, I think Lita, Amy Dumas, is actually single, and Edge is married to Beth Phoenix, who Beth Phoenix is from Buffalo. And like I said, Edge is kind of right up the road. He's from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, so.
I've been very bad, Vince. I deserve a spanking.
And you're gonna eventually drug his wife.
You did double up Linda's dosage, did you not?
Sure did.
It wasn't quite pitched like this. I might have been like, what am I gonna do now? It was something that evolved. It was like, let's see where we can take this. And well, it took some interesting turns.
Get this now. I kissed Trish Stratus in front of my wife in a wheelchair. Oh my God. And the reason why we did that was to show what a despicable heel I was. I mean, you can't get any more despicable.
We were very aware of what we were doing to provide fuel for our storyline. And Linda was super cool about it too. She was in on it, we were all in on it. There was a scene where I lean over and I kiss Linda. And that came from Linda. Like, she's like, oh, it would irk so many people if you would just like lean over and kiss me on the head.
What you must do is evoke emotion, whether it's anger, whether it's happiness, even sometimes disgust if the bad guy, went a little too far. But it's always about emotion.
Have a nice Valentine's Day, Linda. The on-screen affair with Trish, what was the family's reaction to that one?
I don't think our family had an objection to it because they knew I was a character. Trish was a character. So, as I recall, I don't think anyone had a problem with it.
If anything is mentioned about my mom, usually my first reaction is no. My mom's kind of sacred to me, so I didn't quite like that one.
Shane said he was a little bit...
Okay. Shane is a bit more conservative than the rest of us, so Shane may have had a little bit of a problem with that because he sometimes, is you getting too close to real now? I'm thinking, this is a storyline, it's characters, entertaining the audience. This is a go with it.
So 15 years later, I'll do interviews, we'll talk about the good old days, and it It never fails. It will always be like, so there was this time, and I'm like, when you got on all four and you bark like a dog.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You're sorry? Well, I'll tell you what, if you're that sorry, then prove to me just how sorry you are. Get on your hands and knees like a dog.
The bark like a dog scene obviously is very memorable and was really, yeah, I wish I never did that one.
I used to have a female dog, and that bitch did everything I told her to do. Now, damn it, get out! Get out! Bark like a dog. Come on, tell me you're sorry.
With the barking like a dog segment, they want me to be like, it was horrible. But that's exactly the feeling we wanted you to feel. Don't you get it?
If you're really, really sorry, Trish, take your clothes off. I said take it off now. What kind of man is this?
That's the WWE fans in the late 90s and early 2000s for you. They hate when Mr. McMahon tells Trish Stratus to get down on all fours and bark like a dog. But if Vince McMahon tells her to take her clothes off, you know, they'll fucking go ballistic and they'll start cheering. It's a funny WWE universe that we have, I must say.
That is an amazing. Have your cake and eat it too.
They're very fickle. The WWE universe fans are very fickle. They don't know what they want half the time, right? Vince McMahon can tell Trish Stratus, get down on your hands and knees, bark like a dog. It's all booze. It's all hate. Vince McMahon tells her to take her clothes off. They want to see that. Apparently, they paid money for a ticket to see that. The WWE Universe fans, I've always said, they don't know what the hell they want. It's fucked.
Kind of heel performance, because at the same time that he's getting everybody to know that we're supposed to hate him, he's giving them a titty show.
Oh, you're sorry. You're sorry. Take your bra off and take it off now.
Knowing that he's bad for doing so doesn't get in the way of the pleasure of watching her be humiliated.
I thought the segment sucked when I saw it, but, you know, wrestling was very much for guys. And guys who fantasized over hot women, but also kind of hated them because they could never get them. So therefore, seeing hot women demeaned was kind of cool.
See, now that's kind of a very demeaning thing for Dave Meltzer to say, how basically the demographic for this time in the WWE was just like a male audience, specifically more guys in like their teens and their 20s, late 20s, kind of like early 30s. And how they kind of just had these sexual fantasies where it was like, oh, we get to see hot women on TV. We want to see them do sexual acts because we could never get hot women in real life. I mean, that is kind of a very demeaning thing to say to wrestling fans in general. I don't agree a lot with Dave Meltzer. I don't really like Dave Meltzer as a wrestling analyst, to be just honest with you. I think Dave Meltzer says a lot of things in this documentary that I'm just very much against. And let's see your wife, Dave Meltzer. Let's see what you're pulling. Let's see what you're bagging, because I doubt it's anything special either. But fuck, man, like, to kind of just demean wrestling audiences like that. I mean, there's snow bunnies, there's baddies in the audience all the time. I don't think. I think now it's kind of more common actually that it's like a mixed audience where it's like you have younger fans, you have older fans, you have male fans, you have female fans. So it's a little bit more mixed in modern day speaking. But again, this is, you know, late 90s, kind of early 2000s. And but I definitely don't agree with the statement that he made saying, you know, these are just fans who can't approach hot women in real life and try to date them. Yeah, that's kind of far-fetched for me, but
to a lot of those guys, it's a very ugly way to say it, but that's exactly what it was.
We knew we were presenting a sensitive scene to the fans, and we knew that it was going to be talked about. We knew it was going to be interpreted and misinterpreted, but we were aware of that. And the thing is, when we did that scene, we knew the comeuppance would come at WrestleMania, the grandest stage of all.
Ultimately, it all played out at WrestleMania.
So now we are at WrestleMania 17, 2001. And I've talked about it with you guys. I've told you before. WrestleMania 17, 2001 is the day the Attitude Era died. It is what wrestling fans know as the end of the Attitude Era, because after WrestleMania 17, 2001, it was never the fucking same anymore.
A match with Shane against my dad.
It was son versus father. And one corner was my girlfriend, Trish, storyline. And in Shane's corner was Linda, my wife.
You know, I had to stand up for the abuse that was going on with my mom. You know, I just couldn't take it anymore, which would be accurate. And my sister taking the other side, you know, like cutthroat, pretty much like my dad. I was so nervous going into that match because I've never raised a hand on my father. It's always been one way. You know, when I was younger, my dad and I would wrestle.
2001 WWE is definitely a strange time. But like I said, WrestleMania 17, 2001, this is the day the Attitude Era died. Vince McMahon has a match booked against his son, Shane. I believe that was also a street fight that they did. But Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon have a match together at WrestleMania 17. And obviously, you know, Vince McMahon is still playing the heel character at this point. But little do fans know that in the main event, Stone Cold is going to switch over to the dark side, transition to a heel, if you will. And that is exactly what kills the Attitude Era. It is the final footnote to wrestling fans. That is the day the Attitude Era died, WrestleMania 17, 2001. So Vince McMahon earlier that night has a match with against his own blood, against his own son in reality, Shane McMahon. And little do the fans know yet what's coming in that main event. But
one time, my dad grabbed like all my rib meat. You know, he went in there with the skin and everything else. And then I went, oh, and then as I peeled back, he grabbed my hair on the back end and then pushed me back. I was like, you totally cheated. I go, you can't do that. He goes, that's what I do in life. I cheat and I win. He goes, learn that lesson. He says, sometimes you got to cheat. And I was like, all right. So before I went out that match, I started kind of panicking. I was like, oh, I can't do it.
Now Shane to strike me, and I can't do it. Slap me, you can do that. No, I can't. I can slap you.
Bell rings. My dad hits me with about 4 shots in the face. It's like right off the bat.
I walked him a couple of times and got his attention, and okay, no problem now.
And I was like, oh, bam, and my eyes swelled up. I mean, immediately. I was like, well, this may be a little easier than I thought.
That was my WrestleMania moment that year. I was able to stand up to Vince McMahon and everything he stood for. But I remember working with him on that moment. He's like, do not hold back. And I did not.
they had a couple turns that night. Trish Stratus turned on Vince McMahon. She became babyface. And later in that night, Stone Cold is going to turn heel and switch over to the dark side and become best friends with Vince McMahon, which is what wrestling fans absolutely hated the idea of, which is why the Attitude Era ended at WrestleMania 17 in 2001.
During the match with Shane, Linda slowly stood up. It was a huge pop, and then we had to finish after that. The audience loves it when it looks like it's real. But sometimes it isn't real. These are real life McMahons. And you build up the tension, you build up these characters, and then you have the resolution of that story. Oh, it feels so good.
So Shane McMahon wins the match at WrestleMania 17. Stood up for his mom, Linda. And I wonder if they're actually going to talk about the turn that they did on Stone Cold. That would definitely be interesting to see too.
For Vince, nothing was off limits. What's real, what's not real, it doesn't matter. If it's going to draw money, if it's going to draw interest, anything that makes his business stronger is open for him.
I want you to give your mother a message, and that is that soon, after this divorce is final, there's going to be a new Mrs. McMahon. I will look to a Mrs. McMahon that can keep up with my sexual prowess.
Vince was a master of blurring storylines. He would twist something that started out with a piece of reality and then just take it step by step into a place where you didn't know what to believe and what you didn't believe.
You owe me, Sable. And when people like you owe me, I generally collect.
Sable is probably one of the, as far as pure successes in marketing for a short period of time, she's one of the more underrated characters they ever had. I mean, she was a absolute ratings draw. Sable would get on the air and 500,000 people would tune in during her segments. The only one I remember who would do better was Austin. But she left at the peak of her popularity and sued the company.
In this corner, former World Wrestling Federation Women's Champion Sable. Her opponent, Vince McMahon. At the center of this feud is a $110 million lawsuit that included charges of sexual harassment.
So they were like asking you to do things you didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're not going to show the Stone Cold Steve Austin turn at WrestleMania 17, which fans absolutely hated. It was the death of the Attitude Era in 2001. But now we are discussing more about Sable and the sexual harassment that she received working for the WWF, WWE now, obviously. But she did. She fucking sued the company straight out. She wanted $110 million. And, this has to do with a lot of the reasons why she isn't mentioned. She probably will never be in the Hall of Fame. She doesn't want to be associated with the company anymore. She doesn't, the only thing that she has in association to the company now is just being married to Brock Lesnar. But like I said, she's probably one of the only divas from this period of time that really holds that grudge against the WWE. And I don't really think she's ever going to change her mind on it because, like I said, during this time, I mean, the way that the female talent was just being treated, and it was just awful times. It's completely different now how, maybe Liv Morgan has sex appeal, or maybe, fans have certain sex appeal to some of the divas nowadays. But back then, you got to understand, it was a completely different time. I mean, they weren't even having wrestling matches. They were having fucking bikini contests and mud wrestling shit. So Sable definitely, does not want to be associated with the WWE name anymore.
More or less. Okay.
They were making me do things I did not want to do, so.
Sable sued you, the WWF, for $110 million, alleging, amongst other things, she felt degraded.
I don't think I asked her to do anything that was degrading at all.
To another lawsuit, who was Sable and how did she factor into the organization?
Yeah, I don't remember much about Sable in terms of the lawsuit.
I don't remember much about Sable in terms of the lawsuit. Real fucking classy, Vince McMahon. Real fucking classy. You don't remember much about Sable in the lawsuit, but you probably remember throwing the fucking WWE Championship on Brock Lesnar about 1 million times.
You don't remember any of the allegations or any of the things that came out of that?
No, I don't. It's kind of a blur, but all I know is she came back to work, so.
Stephanie McMahon, I want you to meet your new assistant, Sable.
Now, Sable, I guess things are settled in court, and she does decide to come back for just a brief little period of time. Like I said, for me, my memory kind of, I believe around 2003, maybe 2004, is really the last time that WWE fans ever see Sable even associated with the WWE. But like I said, at that point she started basically dating Brock Lesnar, and maybe she just decided to focus more on family than having a pro wrestling career. But I definitely know she still has a lot of hatred and just animosity towards the WWE.
Does Sable's body make you forget that Sable sued our company for millions of dollars? That Sable jumped on the bandwagon of any person who's trying to sue our company? It's all about money to her. That's all Sable cares about. And what did Sable sue for? Sue you? Sue me? She sued us for sexual harassment.
The thing with Vince is that Vince will do anything if he thinks it's the right thing for business, including hiring someone who sued him. I guess there are a couple of ways to thank you. Why don't we start with this?
When you brought her back, there was a storyline with your character where there was an affair.
With who?
With Sable.
Me? Storyline. Show up.
Because in the ring.
How is Vince McMahon gonna act like he doesn't even remember any of this?
We can be entertainingly appalled by whatever he says or does, but we have plausible deniability.
He remembers an entire match card he booked in fucking the 80s for like WrestleMania 2 and 3, but he doesn't remember having the affair with Sable. Yeah, okay, Vince.
Because it's just wrestling, it's just performance. We take for granted that Vince McMahon, in constructing Mr. McMahon, has pulled from his own personal story in order to appeal to us.
Do you remember in 2001 you did that Playboy interview?
Yes, right.
Oh, he definitely remembers that. He definitely remembers in 2001 the Playboy interview. Fast forward a couple years later, 2003, 2004, the affair with Sable has completely left his mind. It's entire memory loss.
And you talked in that one about different affairs.
Now, Playboy asks him straight up in this interview, were your affairs at different times or concurrent? And Vince McMahon responds, different times.
I was curious why you would even go there in that article.
In that article, I just felt like...
And this is 2001. He's admitting all this information to Playboy magazine, where he's pretty much cheated on his wife, Linda McMahon, and has had some affairs.
It was very straightforward. I wasn't playing a character then. You know, it was like a very straightforward, honest reaction to the questions that were asked.
McMahon states in the interview, the sex was terrific, but from an emotional standpoint, I regret it. Playboy asks him, did you change? McMahon responds, I learned about the ramifications of a sexual relationship. Oh my God. Vince, you learned about the ramifications of a sexual relationship. Yeah, no shit.
Did you feel...
I learned about the ramifications of a sexual relationship if you're married. Oh, fuck, Vince. Vince, coming right out in the fucking Playboy magazine interview. Oh, fuck.
Like some of these storylines that came up later, that you were incorporating those elements from your life, or was that totally unrelated?
Totally unrelated. You know, again, me as a human being, generally speaking, is not who that character is. Or sometimes people think it's the same thing, jokingly, but nonetheless, no.
And why does Vince keep trying to play it off like it's only a character? It's only this thing that I was on TV. Vince, have you ever heard the expression, you know, life imitates art and art imitates life? You know, that's pretty much what's happening here. Sure, you could tell people like it's a character and this and that, but at the same time, if you're going behind the scenes and you're kind of still doing, you know, some shady shit and some evil shit, it's like, I don't know if you can pretty much play it off as a character at that point anymore.
Vince McMahon has had one truly monogamous relationship in his entire life. And that's with the business that he built. That's his passion. That's his love. That's his master. Vince doesn't own the business. This business owns Vince McMahon. And he super serves it with his heart and his passion and his life. And if that hurts his wife's feelings, Stephanie's feelings, Shane's feelings, his father's feelings, or his own feelings, those people be damned.
Now, Paul Heyman pretty much hits it right on the head here with the hammer. He's pretty much saying, listen, Vince McMahon has only really had one true love in his life, one true passion, and that is the wrestling business, okay? Vince McMahon doesn't own the wrestling business. The wrestling business owns Vince McMahon. There's a really important saying that I heard from Bryan Danielson a really long time ago when he was giving a wrestling seminar to just, some new up-and-coming, trying to make it into the business kind of guys. But Daniel Bryan was giving a seminar, and he told the guys, listen, straight up, WWE did not hire me because I'm the most intimidating physical presence. They didn't hire me because I can fucking draw 1 million tickets and pack a house and fill out every seat in the building. They hired Bryan Danielson, because of his in-ring ability, because they knew that if they brought him into the company, he would make their stars look even more like stars, okay? He would put the guys over that needed to go over. And he also says, at the end of the day, everybody gets involved with wrestling for their own reasons, but wrestling does not owe you or anybody else anything, okay? It is not something that you own. It is not something that, you're entitled to. It's not something that has to repay you back in any shape or form. You got involved with it for the reason that you got involved with it. And Paul Heyman says right here, he doesn't care, Vince McMahon doesn't care if what he's doing, because he's involved with the wrestling business. He doesn't care if he hurts his wife's feelings. He doesn't care if he hurts Shane's feelings. Doesn't care if he hurts Stephanie McMahon's feelings. He just wants to make himself happy, because that to him is doing what's best for business.
With wrestling's popularity soaring, the owner...
So now they transition back a little bit. Now we're in October of 2000, which, funny enough, we're in October 1st here in 2024, 24 years later, but here's October of 2000.
Of the World Wrestling Federation put their heads together, and they've decided to sell stock in their circus.
The WWF is going public. Going public meant a number of things. It made us legitimate, but the primary reason is simply business. The amount of money that was available to the company, it allowed us to go into the casino business. It allowed us to go into the restaurant business.
Wrestling fans went wild at the opening of a new restaurant bar in New York.
I miss so much when WWE had the restaurant in New York City at Times Square. It was such interesting times in the early 2000s. I really wish I could have went to that restaurant, and they would play, pay-per-views and shit, and they would have live music.
New York's Times Square.
We're right in the middle of it all, and that's really where we belong.
To have that investment, and you can move it around, you can reinvest in yourself naturally, which we've always done, and you can look at other things that might be of value.
Welcome everybody once again to WCW.
So of course, in the year 2000, WCW has pretty much lost the Monday Night Wars at this point. WCW is in shambles. They are pretty much in bankruptcy, and Vince McMahon does exactly what Vince McMahon has always done. He's going to buy his competition.
Kidman and the franchise take their personal vendetta to the ring in a Viagra on a pole match.
By 2000, WWE had taken firm control of the Monday Night Wars against WCW.
we would just kind of laugh at it.
It was a long, slow, painful decline. It was a lot of different people in charge, and it just hit rock bottom. It felt like WCW wasn't even trying.
From a war perspective, you know, the guys fought as hard as they could, but I just don't think you can win a war if you don't have the right, you know, people in the war room making the right decisions.
Get the hell out of my office, and I dare you. Get it right. I dare you.
Now, again, the title of this episode is Family Business. Booker T said himself right there, the guys in WCW, they fought the war hard and they battled until the end. But in the end, they did not win the war because the right people were not in control of making the decisions. WWE, by 2000, had all the momentum going into the future. They were the better company. They were the better wrestling promotion in the year 2000. WCW is pretty much at the end of its wire as well.
Y'all do a lot of things right. Perhaps they do a lot of things wrong. Yes, he was the boss, but he dropped the ball.
Now, like I said, WWE, they have always remained a family business. Vince McMahon Sr. passed it down to Vince McMahon Jr., who then passed it down to Stephanie McMahon and Triple H, Paul Levesque now. But the WCW never had anything like that, okay? World Championship Wrestling was just run by a bunch of guys who really didn't have a fucking care or an idea of what the hell they were even doing as a wrestling promotion. So it definitely makes sense to me why they would lose to the family business that is WWE.
It would be easy for someone to say, wow, look at everything, he went from being really successful and he let that success get to his head. I understand why someone would say that, but it's also someone who has no idea what was really going on behind the scenes.
It's the birth of the largest media and entertainment company in the world. The $7.5 billion merger of Time Warner and Turner Broadcasting has been completed.
Things had gotten so bad internally at WCW because of the AOL Time Warner merger, where I was sitting in a room full of 12, 14 executives I'd never met before, telling me how I was going to produce wrestling when none of them had ever watched the product. None of those executives wanted WCW as a part of AOL Time Warner. Wrestling was lowbrow entertainment, despite the fact that it was hugely popular.
The narrative is that the merger comes and these people don't want wrestling. It's a crutch. WCW was spinning out a terrible product.
So at this time in the 2000s, obviously, Time Warner, Turner Broadcasting, they could give two shits about what happens to pro wrestling, especially WCW World Championship Wrestling. But to them, it's just another knockoff. It's just another novelty. It's something that they could easily replace with one of their other more successful, popular shows at that time. Obviously, things have kind of changed now in modern day, where Turner and TNT, TBS, they have come back and they have kind of, reunited in a way with All Elite Wrestling. AEW, of course, is on TNT and TBS. But 24 years ago, they did not give an absolute shit about pro wrestling or what was going to happen to WCW. I just want to take 1 minute break. I just want to go get myself a drink real quick. We still have about 35 minutes left in the episode, so about a little over half an hour to go. All right, I'm back. Got myself a drink. We're sipping on some brisk pink lemonade. Just some strawberry lemonade. Just needed to get a drink to quench the thirst.
Here comes Buzzkill. Help me for 69.
I remember being told specifically, if our ratings were what they were and we weren't losing so much money, they were fine. When it became a big money-losing company, yes, they wanted to sell it for obvious reasons. And so that opened the door to Vince.
You listen to me, all right?
The company got a call from Turner to say, hey, we're thinking about selling this. Are you interested? The answer is yes.
And in about 3 days, the whole landscape of the business changed.
I often think about Ted Turner. And he said, yeah, when it comes to the competition, I'm going to squish him like a bug. That didn't happen.
Vince bought the company for $2.5 million, which he probably recouped 1 million times over.
Now Vince McMahon buys the WCW for $2.5 million. That is pennies to Vince McMahon and the WWE today, okay? They probably do $2.5 million on a fucking house show. They probably do $2.5 million on a Monday Night Raw or a Friday Night SmackDown, modern day, 2024. This is 2000. Vince McMahon bought him for $2.5 million. And I have no idea the net worth of the WWE at that time in 2000, but $2.5 million is not a lot of fucking money to the WWE and Vince McMahon, especially when all of their WrestleManias moving forward have been considered successful. Like I said, they could do a house show and make $2.5 million. They could do 2 shows in a day and probably make $2.5 million.
It was freaking buying Manhattan for $24.
I was lucky to be on the charter plane the night he purchased WCW. We had a celebration on that flight.
I remember the plane ride was pure insanity. But the next day, business as usual.
It was done very quietly from a corporate level. But the way we communicated the purchase of WCW to the entire fan base was live on air.
Imagine that. Here I am on WCW television. How can that happen? Well, there's only one way. You see, it was just a matter of time before I, Vince McMahon, bought my competition. That's right. I own WCW. In the negotiation, one of the things I wanted was 2 live shows on different networks to cross over.
We did a live simulcast, WCW's last Nitro in Panama City. WWE was in Cleveland. And that was the big reveal.
The audience was shocked, and we were able to pull this off without it breaking beforehand. Obviously, you all know I have acquired WCW. I was tempted to watch it, but I couldn't get myself to do it. It would be like finally admitting that I was really beat, and I couldn't get myself to do it. You have to grab your competition by the throat, and you've got to squeeze the life out of your competition, just like I did to WCW. It's not like I get this great joy by winning. This is really arrogant to say. I expect to win. So there's not this huge euphoria. I won. I'm way to go. That doesn't happen. It's gratifying, but I'm on to the next thing.
That was a tremendous high because they took him to the brink and he emerged victorious out of it. But on the one hand, it was a little bittersweet because Vince thrives under pressure and thrives under healthy competition. I think that brings out the best in him. Something is missing when you don't have that anymore. So, it's a new challenge now, like starting a football league.
Fans with football fever are about to have their cravings satisfied. There's a new game in town. WWF mastermind Vince McMahon. He's taking his marketing genius from the ring to the gridiron.
Today, we're confident in announcing our new brand, the XFL.
So what does Vince McMahon do? After he defeats his competition in pro wrestling, Vince McMahon has finally bought his competition, mainly WCW, also ECW, obviously. ECW was pretty much in financial shambles as well. But ECW never really had the rivalry against WWF. But Vince McMahon did purchase pretty much all the competition around WCW and ECW. There was nobody to challenge him anymore, and there wasn't for many years until TNA started becoming a little bit more popular. But what did Vince McMahon decide to do after he purchases the WCW? He said, I need somebody else to compete against now. He's only at his best when somebody is trying to compete against him. So he decides to go head-to-head with the NFL, and Vince McMahon and the WWF create the XFL.
I announced out of nowhere that there was going to be a new football league. Not being prepared, not being in the football business, not knowing that much about football, really, but I thought there's an opportunity to play football when the NFL is not.
McMahon says it will be the most exciting game in town. A brand new football league and one with a decidedly different attitude.
A league where players must train harder and push themselves to the extreme.
That was his idea. Take the sport and put more on WWE flair and spin on it.
Cameras and microphones on players and coaches in the locker room.
I wanted football people could really relate to. Make characters out of everybody. We could follow that from a television standpoint, tell those stories so that you'd be more interested in the characters.
Well, I think it's going to be successful for a lot of reasons. We understand America. We understand what America wants to watch. In my view, this can't fail.
But it did fail, Vince. It did fail, and then you tried to bring it back again, and it still kind of failed until Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson took it over and pretty much combined it with the UFL, the UCFL, something like that.
From a sold-out stadium in Las Vegas, week 1 of the XFL.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the XFL. First week of XFL ratings were awesome, huge. And from my standpoint, it was a success.
Curiosity seekers made the first night of the XFL a success, with a TV rating more than double what advertisers were told to expect.
I think the answer to are people willing to experiment with a Vince McMahon-led football league was a resounding yes. Everybody wanted to see it. It was just that when they did see it, the quality of play was bad.
So Larry and the Hitman offense from their 4-5, and they got a piece of it. Not even swatted away, lost it.
The XFL had opened with a splash because there was heavy promotion. The football was not of high quality, but that didn't bother me. It was the whole WWF sensibility that surrounded it. I thought it was just head-bangingly stupid and crude. Now, people think I'm a little buttoned up about these things, but everything has its place. If there's some wit surrounding it, if there's some element of art or cleverness or high craft surrounding it, then I don't give a fuck, okay? I don't give a fuck. But this had none of that.
Is there any question about the fan demographic the XFL is trying to appeal to? Why not just name the team the Memphis frustrated males who still live with mom?
NBC, I thought they really had a handle on the press, and the press would treat us kindly.
All the NBC executives responsible for creating the XFL will be thrown to their death.
The XFL was a disaster. By the time Vince sat down with me, it had already recorded the lowest ratings in the history of American primetime television.
XFL ratings are down 75% from week 1.
I said to Vince in the green room beforehand, there are going to be some tough questions here. I think they'll be fair, but they'll be tough. He said, fine.
I thought it was going to go and talk about the XFL and be friendly. And I was told that's what it was going to be. Costa started baiting me.
The pregame show, especially week 1, was one of the most mindless things I've ever seen.
Bob did his job. He did it well. He got me.
Well, you want to let me finish here for a second, pal?
I'm asking you the question.
Then coach, shut your mouth and let me answer the question, all right? I'll be happy to answer.
I find myself getting closer and closer. I can feel my hands like just visualizing the way I had my hands wrapped around the screen on the neck.
You don't know what you're talking about.
The Mr. McMahon character is, in some sense, an exaggeration of traits that Vince has. So maybe in that moment, some of it melded.
Would you let me finish?
Absolutely.
I'm going to stay there, pal, okay? With a big smile.
This is amusing.
No, it's amusing you. You're amusing me.
Okay,
I was angry at myself, too, because I was set up and I should have seen it coming, and I did it like an idiot.
It's not WWF enough for that crowd, and it's not good enough football for the sports-minded crowd.
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm what makes this company.
Now, one thing I do just want to add to this, I've also mentioned it many times in these videos where we talk about, pro wrestling. But I have said myself that I think WWE now is trying to appeal more to fans who appreciate real fighting, such as like boxing and UFC, mixed martial arts. I think that WWE is trying to appeal to that kind of fan base, while on the other side of the coin, AEW, All Elite Wrestling, is owned by Tony Khan, who also is an owner to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it's also like, to me, that Tony Khan is trying to cater more to those kind of sports-oriented kind of football fan bases now, okay? So with the WWE, and WWE also has the merger now with UFC. So I think WWE at this point in time is really trying to attract more of those boxing fans, more of the UFC kind of fans. And then the AEW side to it, with Tony Khan being the Jacksonville Jaguars owner, I think he's trying to appeal more to actual football fans and their fan bases. So obviously things didn't work out with the XFL and WWE at this point in time. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that now Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson owns the XFL, so he's pretty much merged that with another kind of independent football league. But still trying to compete with the NFL is kind of it's kind of a sad story in the end, because the NFL has really been around for like so many years, since the 80s as well, and it's like, well, that's kind of got all the fans already attracted to like that one league already. But like I said, for me, in modern day kind of speaking, WWE and UFC, now with their merger, they're trying to appeal to actual real fighting fans, like boxing fans and UFC fans. AEW, All Elite Wrestling, they're trying to appeal to the football market and the football fan bases. And no, I'm not talking European football. I'm not talking soccer. I'm talking American football.
I'm what makes my company and this country go round and round. I take risk.
The first season of the XFL, it turns out, will be the last. The league never took off with the audience, or certainly with the critics.
The XFL failed because it wasn't a good product. In its best years, the WWF and the WWE, on its own terms, was a very good product. This was not a good product.
I think the XFL folding them for 1 year stunk. I mean, Vince went all out on it. The XFL logo that people were seeing, it was Vince holding the XFL ball and looking in the camera.
Shit. That was a shit.
During that time, it was not good. One after another, after another, after another.
And the World Wrestling Federation cannot use WWF anymore. It got body slammed today by the World Wildlife Fund.
When this lawsuit was filed, we tried to fight it, as we do most lawsuits. And it looked like, wait a minute, we're not going to win this thing. They had, in fact, used the initials WWF long before we did. So it changed from WWF to WBE because we were entertainment. It wasn't necessarily a good thing, the fact that we had to change our name.
So WWF, they lose the WWF ownership because they are sued by the World Wildlife Fund. And I remember the motto back in the day for WWF at this time was "Get the F out." And that's when they became WWE. But they switched it from federation to entertainment because that's exactly what Vince McMahon believed that they were. They were World Wrestling Entertainment.
I didn't want to change, But you can't do anything about it once something is closed. You have to move on. Whenever there's a failure, and there have been a lot of failures in my life, if you allow it to fester, you're like, oh man, I wish that would have worked. If I had done this, that would have worked. It would drive you nuts. Let it freaking go and think about something positive and work at something positive. Now you think it's negative.
Vince, one of his, again, many axioms is don't sell. So it's not like he was moping around. Like if you went to work the next day after XFL was finally officially not coming back, you'd never know it. His focus was, okay, what do you got for Raw? Let's do it.
I remember having a conversation with Vince in one of the arenas, and he pulled me aside and he goes, I have this idea about bringing Hulk Hogan back, and I'd love for you guys to headline WrestleMania. What do you think? And I immediately said, I fucking love it. Icon versus icon.
When I went back after we spent 9 or 10 years being a big thorn in Vince's side with WCW and trying to put him out of business, basically, we did not talk about the past.
He's caused me, Hogan has a great deal of frustration, and there were times that I wished I could choke him.
But can't hold grudges in business. My philosophy is, despite what has happened personally, what does the audience want? All they want is to be entertained. So naturally, you swallow your pride and eat a nice plate of caca and bring them back, and there you go.
So now we're at WrestleMania 18, 2002, and obviously, what was supposed to be the main event, I don't actually think it was the main event because I believe Jericho and Triple H was the main event that night, and they had to follow right after Hogan versus The Rock, which seemed impossible to fucking do. So Hogan and The Rock should have been the main event at WrestleMania X8 18 2002, but it wasn't. It was one of those cards where they say, hey, we got like 2-3 main events. No, Vince, no WWE. There's one main event. The main event at WrestleMania X8 2002 was fucking Triple H versus Chris Jericho. And they had a really tough time trying to follow up a match like Hogan versus The Rock, because that's pretty much what people wanted to see that night.
We're thinking back on that WrestleMania. I have goosebumps now, covering my body, because that crowd was on fire, and we felt it.
There was this iconic moment, if you watch that, where they start absorbing the crowd reaction and simultaneously start looking to their left and right. That wasn't rehearsed. That wasn't talked about. Those were...
I believe WrestleMania X8, WrestleMania 18 2002 was in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So that's kind of one of the reasons, too, why they had Jericho in the main event, because Jericho's from Winnipeg. But I think back then they were thinking, the WWF Championship has to be the main event match. But really, at WrestleMania X8, WrestleMania 18 in 2002, fans really were there to see that Hogan versus Rock match, which really should have been the main event, even though no title was on the line. The way that it was booked and the way that it was promoted, it definitely should have been the main event on the card.
Just like two legends knowing to do that in the heat of the moment. And that became the most memorable thing.
It was two eras colliding, and neither individual really knew the way the audience was going to react. I didn't. They were just ready for whichever way it went.
I'm supposed to be the bad guy. He's supposed to be the good guy.
Okay, so now they're going to start talking about how there's a double turn in the match. Okay, and what happens in this match between Hogan and The Rock is this. Hollywood Hulk Hogan is the bad guy. The Rock is the good guy in the match. Okay, you have the villain versus the hero. But they're in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The fans want to see Hulk Hogan win. So even though Hulk Hogan is the bad guy, they start cheering him. And what happens is they start booing The Rock. Okay, so now you have a double turn in the match, and it didn't happen from creative. It happened because the fans in the audience made it happen. That can definitely be a factor in wrestling. Okay, if the fans, like I said, the fans are going to decide at that moment, do they want to cheer you or do they want to boo you? So even though the entire story, even leading up to the match at WrestleMania 18 in 2002, even though Hulk Hogan was the villain in the story and The Rock was the good guy, he was representing the WWE, when they got to Toronto, the fans in the audience wanted to cheer for Hulk Hogan. So they started booing The Rock. Like I said, a double turn in the match. And The Rock pretty much wins the match in the end, so that probably also didn't make a lot of people in Toronto happy, but like I said, The Rock was essentially representing the WWE, and Hogan was representing what was the WCW. He was still Hollywood Hulk Hogan at this point, so he's wearing his black and white gear. But like I said, the fans decided who they wanted to win. They started cheering Hulk Hogan, even though Hogan's the bad guy, started booing The Rock, even though The Rock is the good guy. You had a double turn that night.
Rock started punching me and they started booing him out of the building. The script had to be changed.
The moment we stepped in the ring, the crowd let us know. We love you, Rock, but tonight, Hogan is the reason why you're here. I had to shift on the fly and nuance my way through this match. We didn't change the finish. I still went over that night. But the real winner was Hulk Hogan.
Did Vince ever trusted you after going to WCW?
I think I'm probably at a higher level of trust now than I ever have. I think there's a certain level of comfort to know that I can't rip the shirt off and put 100,000 people in a building.
Every decision he makes is with an eye towards what's good for business. Bringing people back that he's fired, bringing back people who've testified against him in court, people who've gone on interviews and blasted him, and still bringing him back if he thinks, ultimately it helps the company.
Allow me to introduce you to the new general manager of Raw, Eric Bischoff.
People always go like, oh, I'm so afraid to burn my bridge with Vince. And they go like, if you do, you probably have a better shot of going back than if you don't, because that's how Vince operates.
Do you think it's a control thing, or do you think
it's a challenge? I think it's a challenge. If you knock him, he's going to want to prove at the end that you'll come back to him.
I don't think my personal feelings have ever gotten in the way of doing good business.
Well, there's one thing I've learned from the Montreal screw job. There's nothing sweeter than a good double cross.
I'm in business. And business comes first.
So Vince McMahon, they're saying here, Vince McMahon runs a family business. Anybody who was ever on the wrong side of Vince McMahon has ended up going back to Vince McMahon in a way, okay? Like they showed Eric Bischoff, at one time the enemy of the WWF, the rivals in the Monday Night Wars. They show how Hulk Hogan kind of went back to the WWE, right? Did the main event with The Rock, put The Rock over at WrestleMania 18. Even Bret the Hitman Hart after the Montreal screw job and everything that happened with Owen Hart and the tragic death of Owen. Still, decided to squash beef and just put on one last showcase for the WWE fans in a way.
From a general public standpoint, I think the hottest period they ever had would have been 98 to 2002, when they were taking over from WCW and then killing WCW. And then after that, after WCW went down, the whole business went down. During the periods with no competition, wrestling's a lot less interesting. And as far as the creative end, they fell from their peak.
At that time, riding the lightning bolt, I'm on fire, but I was frustrated with the creative process. There were some times when Steve was presented an idea and he would go, I never say this. I don't like it. I don't like the creative.
Steve, lay it all on the line here. Give us the bottom line.
Bottom line is everything sucks. I'm not happy with the direction Stone Cold Steve Austin's going. I ain't happy with the direction our company's going.
Things were not good at that point for Vince and I, but I also had a lot of injuries. And I decided I've had about enough. Probably be in the best of my interest to ride off into the sunset.
So like I said, right around the time period of the year 2003, WrestleMania 19, The Rock and Stone Cold have their final match together, also technically their final match in the company at that time. 2003 is pretty much the final goodbye to The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Rock wanted to go off to Hollywood and make movies, which is now a successful vision because he's obviously very successful doing that, and he's made a career out of doing that. Stone Cold in 2003 was not only frustrated with the creative process, he thought all the writing sucked, he thought the ideas sucked, was not happy with the direction that the WWE was going in, and he also could not handle the strain of physically being able to perform in a wrestling ring anymore. So The Rock wanted to go to Hollywood and make movies. He ended up being very successful with that, has a career with that now. And Stone Cold did not like the direction of the company from a creative standpoint, and his body physically could not handle the strain anymore. It could not handle the physical endurance that he would have to go out there and perform all the time. So this is 2003. And like I said, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin had very short careers when you look at how much they were popular, and honestly, they could have been around for years to come. I mean, you still see it today. The Rock, still makes little appearances here and there, but Stone Cold, his body pretty much had enough right in 2003, and he just felt like he couldn't do it anymore. I do know that Stone Cold also tried to make some movies, and there was a couple movies that I seen with Stone Cold also involved, but Stone Cold never really felt like he was the best actor. Obviously, that's more Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's department. But right in 2003, that's pretty much the final goodbye for The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And after 2003, like I said, the company has to shift focus to the future. Who do they want to be the future of the company? Guys like Brock Lesnar, Batista, John Cena, Randy Orton.
He was a huge star and he's gone.
It's a very malleable product, the WWE. Stars leave all the time. Someone like The Rock, because he took off in the movies. The Rock, him and Austin were probably 1 and 1A as far as being the top names in the company. Both of them were gone by 2004, and so now it's time to make new stars.
So there was an infamous promo where Vince was addressing the Raw roster.
More than any one quality that makes me the successful man that I am, I would have to say that one quality is...
And he said, ruthless aggression.
Ruthless aggression.
He gave a speech to the entire cast of performers and be like, guys, we are searching. This is the time. I need someone with ruthless aggression.
Who has enough ruthless aggression to make the necessary sacrifices?
I'm looking for someone who's like, okay, I'm the fucking guy.
Who among you wants to become a superstar?
At that time, I was, new and up-and-coming talent, so I wasn't there for the on-camera speech, but like 3 days after that, I was just at a television taping where The Undertaker couldn't make it.
Come on, guys, there's got to be somebody back there that wants to seize the moment.
I needed somebody. And one person in the production meeting was like, how about John Cena? And that's how I got my first televised match.
John Cena, we heard a little bit about him.
It was against Kurt Angle, a marquee performer in the WWE.
What is the one quality that you possess that makes you think that you can walk out here and come into the ring and face the very best in the business?
John Cena basically says, I'm going to beat you because of ruthless aggression. Ruthless aggression!
So that kind of spawned the next few years or so and became, after the fact, known as the Ruthless Aggression era.
This was an era that was coming off of pushing the envelope and then transitioning to an era of more realism. They were showcasing guys' ability, guys like Eddie Guerrero, guys like Kurt Angle. They were using people's real names. Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, Chris Benoit, Batista. It was a phase of realism.
Wow. They mentioned Chris Benoit in the documentary, and it came from John Cena. But obviously, these were some of the future stars that the company had their eye on to kind of lead the charge for after, 2002, going into 2003 now, 2004 mainly, because in 2003, like I said, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Stone Cold Steve Austin are pretty much out of the company by 2004. And now they need somebody else to be the face of the brand.
So I had to be John Cena, and I really didn't know who I was. And I didn't have personality. I just kept being this guy. It was just uninteresting. Like I almost got fired for being that bad.
Frustration by John Cena.
But when you kind of knew you were on your way out, I really wanted to have a little more fun. Some of the guys just happened to be rapping on the back of the tour bus. And I kind of got up in my seat and made my way to the back. And for 5 minutes, I shredded everybody. I didn't realize that Stephanie McMahon was on the bus. And she was like, would you like to do that on TV? I said, fuck yes, I would.
Besides open mics, one thing that gets me boiled is an old school 30-man battle royal. I'ma win this, I'ma make my impression. Show Vinnie Mac that I got ruthless aggression.
John had the ability to rap. Bingo, instead of being someone that you might want to cut, from the roster. It's like, ooh, hang on, this is different. This is very different.
John Cena, the doctor of thugonomics.
He went out there, balls to the wall, and did it so well. All of a sudden, he was a huge star, and the audience loved it.
For the new WWE champion, John Cena.
When you become popular, and the audience understands you and reacts to you, that's when you begin to garner Vince's attention.
You sort of remind me of myself. You come out here, you say what's on your mind, you don't give a damn about anybody else, do you?
That's when our relationship really began to pick up.
So in 2004, the WWE was looking for brand new star power to lead the charge into the future. 2003 was the end of The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. By 2004, the company had a lot of eyes. They had their eyes on certain talent such as Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Kurt Angle, obviously Randy Orton. And then by 2005, that is pretty much when they decided to put over Batista and John Cena in the same night. Batista defeated Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. John Cena defeated John Bradshaw Layfield, JBL, for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 21 in 2005. So now by 2005, they pretty much have all the pieces to the puzzle that they need to kind of start moving forward in the next direction.
Vince taught me a ton about the business and how to perform. As the rap persona, I took so many things that I saw and didn't like and crafted them into this character. It's the same thing Vince did with Mr. McMahon.
In terms of getting heat with my character, Mr. McMahon, one of my problems and one of my assets in life is when I think about doing something, I go try it.
Blessed be the name of Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Highway to hell.
Was there ever a point during that time where you got a script or something where you were just like, this is too far?
Yeah, I screwed your brains out. And then Vince would make me do it anyway.
There was a bit of a concern amongst performers that if you didn't do what you were asked, that you would get punished. And yeah, it did happen to some on occasion, sometimes. There was one time where I was the champion at the time, and then suddenly I was in a scene where I was going to be making out with a female, which I didn't think my character wanted to do. Was it a coincidence that I lost the championship the next week? Maybe. Maybe I got punished. I'm not sure.
You said there were a few times that you said no. Do you remember some of the things you said no to?
Yes. Yeah, there were a couple, but yeah, I'm not going to tell the one.
So one of my storyline ideas was that Stephanie gets pregnant. And I think I was the one who impregnated her.
Vince, what the hell is wrong with you? This man comes up with a story in the WWE where Stephanie McMahon gets pregnant and she is impregnated by her own father, Vince McMahon. No wonder the fucking WWE fans never fucking found out about that story or wanted to see that fucking story. And this was probably during the time, too, when they had just terrible stories like the fucking Kane and Katie Vick story. Fucking just all of the Lita impregnations from like Snitsky and Kane. Fucking terrible fucking writing. Terrible stories at one point in WWE. But who the... Vince, you can't fucking tell me that that was your idea. You can't... You honestly... I hope that's not your fucking idea of a fucking good story.
My character. I think it was something like that. It was like, no, that one didn't make it.
Steph has Mr. McMahon, the character, Vince McMahon, the boss of WWE, and the father. It's hard to separate.
I call him Vince in business, and I call him Dad at home. My father is different than my boss. My boss can be tougher than my dad. He expects results. He demands results, especially from his family.
Vince, he didn't want to do total nepotism. It wouldn't reflect good on Vince. It wouldn't reflect good on Shane and Stephanie. So he had them in the trenches working various jobs before they came on, in prominent positions. And he was tough on them when Shane and Stephanie were pitching ideas. He'd flat out reject them. He'd flat out say they sucked. He wants to hold them to a higher standard.
Would you say your dad was tough on you growing up?
My dad was definitely tough on me growing up. Still is to this day.
I was harder on my kids in the business than anybody else. I guess it's because I wanted to be better than everybody else. Their last name is McMahon, so step the hell up.
Always a higher standard. I represent him, and it's very important to represent him correctly.
Let's come down here.
He is certainly easier on me than Shane, for sure. But I didn't challenge him the same way my brother did. I think there's a unique relationship there with fathers and sons.
Father and son. Wait a minute. Whoa.
People send the articles and books or whatever it is on family business. I've never seen one that was like, that was great. Got along great with my dad or whatever, and then he gave me the business and it all went great. We got along great right until they passed, and then, it doesn't happen. It's tough.
Shane, what are you doing?
You gotta look no further than Shane.
You never cared about me. I couldn't do anything right for you. Nothing is ever right. My business deals, no matter how much money I made you, was never good enough for you.
What the McMahon family has about it is a lot of people don't know the internal dynamics of what goes on in real life. Like, is it that, cutthroat behind the scenes?
The only thing I ever wanted from you, the only thing I ever wanted is for you to be proud of me, But I finally figured it out that's never ever gonna happen. Because it's never been about me, it's always been about you. You, Dad!
But you don't peel back that curtain all the way, because why would you ever straighten that out? Let people talk about it.
This is about family business. This is about us, Dad. This is about you and me. Oh, no, no, no. This is not family business anymore. This is my business. I would suggest that you get the hell out of here, whether you're my son or not, right now.
I never really quite understood where Shane fit into everything over the years. Sometimes he was being embraced, sometimes he was completely invisible. I never understood what was going on, but I always felt he was a little bit of the black sheep of the family, and I never knew what the actual story was behind what happened with his relationship with his dad.
Shane absolutely wanted to be the next McMahon, and he always figured he would be. At one point, he wanted his dad to buy him a company that he could run and prove that he was the next generation McMahon promoter before he takes over WWE.
At the time, the UFC, they got into some financial problems and came to us and said, would you like to purchase, the UFC? I go, this is cool. Well, I said, Dad, let's just go for this one.
So now they're talking about Shane McMahon's endeavors into wrestling promotion. They're saying here how Shane McMahon wanted to be the next great McMahon promoter after his dad. And Shane wanted his own company so that way he could prove to Vince that he was able to do such a thing. The UFC was just on the rise. This is probably around like 2003, 2004, maybe even 2005 as well. But UFC is kind of on the rise, and Shane McMahon wants to be the next great promoter in pro wrestling, wants a company of his own to prove to his father that he can do this. Shane approaches Vince McMahon with the idea of purchasing the UFC, and Vince McMahon shuts him down.
I thought we could really grow that brand because it's tailor-made for what we do. We have a production team, we have a live events team, we have a merchandising team. We have all of it, just ready to go. So to me, it was plug and play.
When it was presented in terms of buying UFC, I didn't like that business model. Because our business model is you can create characters, much like Disney or someone else, and we can use them forever. As opposed to a boxer / UFC. Once you beat, once you're hurt or something, it clears over.
This is the real deal. There's no acting involved. There's no way these guys can act this good.
We're in show business. That's a sport.
So he thought about it and passed, and passed on the opportunity, and that was it.
Would have it been a good investment?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20. It would have been an excellent investment.
10 years later or something, UFC was sold for a lot of money. And Shane, I think, wants to take credit for the idea of buying UFC. Shane really thought, that's the way to go. So if that's the way to go, Shane, you take your money and put it in, which didn't work. It wouldn't work, but because it'd take a huge investment. And Shane only had a little bit, so that's not a good investment.
Most definitive moment I've ever seen between Vince and Shane was a creative argument that happened one night. Shane had an idea that he really believed in, and Vince totally disagreed with it. And with most things that happen with Vince, once they start to escalate, they escalate really fast. And Vince finally turned to Shane and he said, "Not while I'm alive." And Vince, who was eating something, took his knife and handed it to Shane. And he says, "Right there. Come on. Right there. If you want this so bad, stick the dagger right here. Because that's what you're going to have to do to make that decision. And if you don't stick the dagger right here, then I know you're not man enough to do it. And I have to take that into consideration as well. Or you can buy me out the way I bought out my father. And if I don't get out of your way, be prepared to get rid of me the way I would have had to get rid of my father when he wasn't doing things my way at all."
was a really hard decision for me to leave the only thing that I love and the only business I ever wanted to work in my life. But my dad, especially then, was strong at the helm. And I was like, well, if this is the time for me to go try certain things, then that's the time.
Well, the reason why Shane left, Shane wanted to take the chair, so to speak, and thought it was time for me to leave. Shane had a lot of value, but it wasn't his company, it was mine. It's so difficult for family business. Damn, that's difficult. It was almost like we were opposed on everything, and we grew apart.
We just weren't seeing eye to eye on certain things. But he's the boss, and when he says we're painting something blue, we're painting it blue. And I was just like, I can either stay in here and watch us implode, or it's time to step back. He's my dad. You know, I'm not gonna jeopardize that. So I decided to step away. So I thanked him, gave him a hug, and that was it.
Everyone has to understand their place. And when a family member thinks, wait a minute, I've got this.
Get to stepping. This is my show. I'm running things here.
So Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon had a lot of differences creatively. Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon could not agree on what they wanted to do with stories, with moving the company in the next direction. Shane McMahon wanted to be the next great McMahon promoter. He wanted to take over the business after his father. But creatively, they cannot agree with each other. And it gets to the point where Vince McMahon essentially just tells Shane, listen, if you want this company so bad, you're going to have to buy me out. The same way that Vince McMahon bought out his father. And Shane McMahon was in no position to ever take the WWE from Vince McMahon. But because of their creative differences, Shane decided it was better for him to leave than stay and watch his dad do whatever the hell he wanted to do with the company.
They don't quite have the vision that someone who's grown and created a business. They have a different vision. And it may have worked, but you know what? We're going to go with my vision. I would advise anyone, don't bring your family into the business. It's brutal. It's somewhere along the line it's going to explode.
Over decades, McMahon turned the WWE into $1 billion entertainment juggernaut. But recent events indicate that leadership could be changing.
New bombshell allegations of sexual abuse.
I mean, this is damning. It's insane. Are they gonna jettison Vince? I don't know.
The future of this company very much hangs in the balance.
This most recent scandal is going to shock everyone.
In 1999, Rayna Lesnar, also known as Sable, settled her lawsuit against Titan Sports, WWE. And that is the end of episode 5. So, only one episode remains, and that will be on Friday night when we come back for the next stream. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Your viewership, your support, it means everything to me. It really does, guys. Like I said, the next time we stream will most likely be on Friday night, and we will watch the final episode in the Mr. McMahon documentary series on Netflix. I'm excited to see how it all ends. And maybe this isn't the only season that we're going to get. Maybe there's another one. But thank you so much for being with me tonight. October 1st, 2024. Spooky season is upon us. Libra season is arrived. Thank you so much again for watching. I appreciate it so much. And until next time, peace, God.